So I bought this larger motor, and it's really quite a problem. It doesn't fit in any way. So the question therefore rises, what are we going to do? This is the end, this is the part that it has to fit to. Trouble is, I've ground off all the edges, it's not even square anymore, so I'm really going to have to think about how to do it. I already have. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut a piece of brass, this big, not that big really, but going to start with a piece of brass. I'm going to hold it in the vise and I'm going to drill and then cut a piece that'll snugly fit around the boss of this motor. I'm then going to take it out, fit this in, and I'm going to drill probably like that. I'm going to drill 2 holes because the centers for these are quite a lot wider than the other motor was anyway. So that I can put this on, put a screw in, and actually hold it and clamp it on. Step number 1. Step number 2 will be to build the bush that I'm going to use with my gear. So I have the gear here. I have a fairly small hole. I'm going to put that in the lathe. I'm going to line that up nicely, and I'm going to open that out quite a bit bigger. The next step will be to put a piece of brass into the lathe and turn it down so that it is a lovely push fit into that gear. Once I've done that, I'm going to drill that out so that it will fit that shaft, and then I'm going to cut that off so that I have a bush that I can use then with this gear. Okay, now while that piece of brass is in there and I've turned that down and I've got the hole for the shaft of this in there, I'm then going to turn this down as a separate little bush. This is just temporary, which will fit this hole perfectly, this little hole, so that I've got something to use to line this motor up onto this holder. So, what shall we do then? We shall take this half, as you can see, has a hole in there. I've now got a bush so that I can hold the shaft of the motor in place perfectly. I've got a piece of plate that's connected to the motor, and I can then drill holes into the body to fasten it in, and it will all be held in place and it will all be true. Because that's the trick. It's how do I fasten this onto here in such a way that it's going to hold. That's the plan. Let's do it. Okay, so this is the plate of brass that I think will do to start with. I always like to make things square because they're easy to hold in vices and chucks and what have you until you get to the last moment. And what I'm doing here clearly has been to hold this in the vise and open this so that it nice and neatly takes the spigot on the front of this motor. And now I've put the screws in, and you can see that that's being held very nicely. Now I've made this nice little brass insert here just so that I can line this up and get this straight. This is not going to stay, I'm going to throw it away, but right now it enables me to line this motor up perfectly as its entry point into the gearbox. So I have drilled and tapped the brass, and I've now got screws going through into that to hold that in place, and it's perfectly in place. Here is a new boss that I'm going to use because the shaft on this motor is quite large, and you can't quite see this, but I'm using a socket here just to push that on. Doesn't need any glue. That's as tight can be. Very happy with that. And I've also drilled a hole in there so that I can put a grub screw in and hold it in place, and that's really nice. I'm very happy with that. So the next step obviously is going to be to put Humpty together, put the rest of it together. And you can see here the bushes on that top gear. Once again, all of the build for that gearbox you can see on the web, on the page right now if you want to go to it. The whole thing was made from scratch. I'm screwing in the thread. Bolted on the piston. Now putting a little bit of Vaseline into that cylinder just to assist with the first slide in. And that is now nicely in place. Just turning that around because the tab is on the wrong way at the moment. And that's the way that's to go on. Fits onto those little screws. And now you can see this operating. This is a quick drawing that I've made of the plastic pieces I'm going to put on either side of this threaded strip in order to hold micro switches, and you can see them here. If you want to look at that, you can stop the movie and do so, but this is all fairly straightforward. This nice little micro switch is going to go right down near the motor. That's it. Slots right in there, and this one goes up at this end. In broad terms, that's how it's going to work. But the next thing that I need to do is cut the length of the piston thread so that it actually fits and actually works. And I've done that now, and I'm putting this on finally, and I'm using silastic in the process because I don't want this to come off and I don't want it ever to leak, although silastic is pretty easy to remove once you've put it on. It's all now bolted into place. And I'm pretty sure that when it's going to hit that micro switch when the piston now hits the very end of its travel. That's it, and it's running. This is running on 6 volts, so it's pretty slow. And right at the end, it's going to come up to the micro switch. Hope you can see that. And that's it. And now I want to position the piston right down at the other end of its travel. Just remove it a bit from there so that I can see where the micro switch needs to go at this end. And that is it. That looks pretty good. So the micro switches are now in place. The travel is now in place. Okay, this is interesting. I've wired this up now. According to the wiring diagram, and I now have 3 wires that are going to feed into this. This one is always the earth, so I'm just going to connect this now to the earth. The other one will always be positive and one will always be earth. So we'll switch them around and just see how we go. So when this one gets powered, the piston should start moving, but it's only at 6 volts, so it's quite low. Okay, and now I'm going to test the micro switch. Doesn't do anything. This micro switch, what that's telling me is I've got to wire the motor the other way around. Okay, I've turned them around. Now we'll see how we're going with this. I can't remember. It's right at the end of its travel up here, but I think if we get this right, it'll go the other way. Maybe not. Might have mucked it up. That's it, and it's stopped with the micro switch, which is now working. So now we take the blue and the yellow and we make them earth. And now it should be running away. That's it. I don't really have the time to watch it go all the way down, but I know that when it hits that micro switch, it stops. That's pretty good. It's got this bit of a thing happening, but honestly, that's pretty sweet. So now what I need to do is neaten this up. So to neaten it up, I'm using hot glue. Absolutely magic stuff. Holding these wires in place. Everything now looks quite neat. I've got my male and female plugs, and that piston is done.